Hello, and welcome to Global Data Themes Instant Insights. At Global Data, we define a theme as something that keeps a CEO awake at night, as businesses that invest in important themes will succeed, and those that don't will fail.
Hello and welcome back to Instant Insights. I'm Sarah Coop, and today I'll be talking to Emilio Campa, who is an analyst in the thematic intelligence team at Global Data. We'll be chatting about autonomous vehicles and their potential security vulnerabilities. Thanks a lot for coming on the podcast today, Emilio.
Thanks for having me, Sarah. I'm very excited to be here, my first time.
Amazing. So let's jump into some questions. So in your recent report, the Cybersecurity in Automotive report, you stressed the importance of protecting the infrastructure that connected cars rely on. Could you tell us why is this so important?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think in today's kind of modern age, cars are starting to look more like computers than ever before. And because of this, they're becoming targets for hackers. As a bit of context, Global Data estimates that by 2030, 80% of the value of a vehicle will reside solely in its software and content. I mean, if you think back 20 years ago, you'd be lucky if your car had a CD player. I know mine didn't. But as kind of cars integrate more software, there's a greater need to connect these cars to each other, to the infrastructure around them, both for kind of information and safety purposes. So think learning about traffic jams or what the local weather's going to be like.
Oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So more connections leads to greater vulnerability?
Yeah, that's right. So the kind of greater the connection, the wider the network that hackers can kind of poke into until they find a vulnerability. I mean, the old idea of kind of security in cars was that someone would jimmy open your lock with a big old rusty keychain or something. But now they can do it entirely remotely. They don't even need to be near your car. I think the famous example happened in 2015 in Wired, where they reported about a Jeep being hacked entirely remotely, being driven whilst the driver was still in the passenger seat. And this has been happening and advancing over the past decade, getting into vehicles, collecting sensitive data, taking control of vehicles, remotely unlocking doors. It's all terrifying. It's all getting worse.
Yeah, that is absolutely terrifying. I can't imagine that someone remotely driving my car. So do you think, is cybersecurity the most important issue for auto companies because of this? Is it being discussed in boardrooms?
Well, I think this is the issue, is that, yes, it's being discussed. I mean, if you look at kind of Global Data's filing analytics, mentions of cybersecurity have expanded almost fourfold between 2016 and 2021. So it's obviously becoming more important, but it's still not important enough. You compare this to ESG, environmental, social and governance issues. For example, in 2021, the number of mentions of ESG in company filings was over 20 times bigger than the number of cybersecurity mentions. Obviously, it's competing with these big major themes and it's just not getting the attention it needs.
So do you think it should be top of the pile then of issues that should be discussed rather than, obviously ESG is very important, but do you think cybersecurity is up there?
I'd say so, especially for automotive companies. I mean, there's more focus on autonomous vehicles. And with that, I think kind of public safety issues are definitely becoming more important. But even apart from that, cyber breaches and cyber attacks for autonomous vehicles and also just for the company at larger directly affects the value and integrity of car manufacturers' brands. And there's always new vulnerabilities coming about. As these kind of autonomous vehicles get developed and the technology and software kind of increases and expands, they'll be difficult to find, hard to fix, and those hackers will be always and constantly trying to find these new vulnerabilities.
No, that's really, really interesting. Thanks for explaining that. Could you just tell us a bit more? What is being done to force auto companies to get more on top of their cybersecurity? Like, we know it's important, but what are they forced to do in order to kind of combat it?
So at the moment, there are certain regulations that they have to meet or pass in order to sell their vehicles or gain type approval, as it's called in the industry. But the problem is with a lot of the regulations, it's not clear. They give processes and kind of management that should be in place, but they're acting as guides. They don't give clear targets or even clear guidelines. And a lot of these automotive companies, cybersecurity isn't a major theme for them. It's not a core. Cybersecurity is not a core competence for most automotive companies. They have to outsource. They need technical expertise that requires time and money, and they often meet just the basic requirements in order to save on cost.
Interesting. And does it vary depending on kind of where they're based on their geography, where they're based in the world?
Yeah, so for data protection, if you look at kind of China or the US or the EU, they've all got their own kind of ideas. The GDPR, the kind of China administration of cybersecurity, the US as well has got something else. The UNECE as well, the UN Economic Commission for Europe, are introducing a new regulation, Regulation 155. It comes into force in July, and it will be an important regulation for automotive companies to focus on, and in order to get type approval, they need to meet this requirement.
Interesting. Okay. If you want to know more about regulation, Emilio's your guy, honestly. Cool. So could you just leave us with what are the consequences of the auto industry not taking cybersecurity seriously?
Yeah, of course. So as the auto industry kind of increases the connection, it becomes more digital, greater electronic systems into vehicles. The companies themselves are becoming more digital. This means the auto industry will face more cyber attacks. These cyber attacks cause severe reputational damage, are very expensive to remediate. Automotive cybersecurity cannot be ignored.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Emilio, for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Honestly, our resident cybersecurity and auto expert. Thanks a lot for listening, everyone. And from us at Global Data Thematic Intelligence, see you next time.